Wednesday War College. We're talking about the Las Vegas Police Department revealed a potential motive in a Cybertruck explosion at a news conference on Friday. We'll put that video up next, a short little video from the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. And it gives information about the possible motive that led an active duty military member, Matthew Liversberger, may he rest in peace, a resident of Colorado Springs, to commit suicide and blow up a Tesla Cybertruck on New Year's Day in front of the President-elect Donald Trump's hotel in Las Vegas. To Dan and Mark, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. It came out back in 2014. It's been a while. It's called Deliver Us from Evil. Let me give you a synopsis, and this is why I said what I said the last segment, and then I want to hear from you guys. Deliver Us from Evil was an American, demonic horror film. It was based on a book by former NYPD Sergeant Ralph Sarchi, who also was deployed overseas and came back from, I think, Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan, excuse me. So then he joined the NYPD. After 17 years, he basically left the job and went into full-time, some type of apostolic work. But the movie is about a couple of Marines from New York, a couple of Americans from New York, joined the Marines, went overseas to Iraq. That's what the movie's about. They encountered an ancient demon in a cave in Iraq as they're poking around. One of them died, and they saw there was this painting on the wall of the cave, which seems to be a doorway to the world of demons. It was in Latin. It was these phrases in Latin inviting demons into the cave. So these one of the guys died. The three of them, after discharging from the Marines, they came back to New York and they started going on a crime spree. So basically, these three Marines that were brought back with them, they brought back what I would call some ancient clinging spirits, which tormented them mentally and caused them towards disordered behavior. And that's what the movie's about. So, Dan, I want to hear your take. I want to hear also from Mark's take. Is this just mental illness from TBIs and PTSD, or could it be diabolical as well?
Well, I think it's both. You see, like in Luke's gospel, for example, Jesus lays hands on the sick and demons are driven out on a couple of occasions. He in Luke chapter 6, they came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and even those who were tormented by unclean spirits were cured. Everyone sought to touch him because power came forth, and he healed them all. Healed them all. The Greek word that Luke largely uses to heal is sozo, and it also means to save. So to heal and to save is the same thing. To be healed is to be saved. And so what we see is soldiers coming back. They go over oftentimes with no protection. They have all the armaments we need to defend ourselves in the physical battle, but we send them over largely without any spiritual protection. So they're going over there with no spiritual protection. I know Father Ripperger has told me that there's been a couple occasions that he had a series of soldiers returning that were coming to him for prayer, and he prayed a severing prayer, a binding prayer, a minor exorcism, and their afflictions went. It was that they were picking up clinging spirits over there. So that is one element of it. The clinging spirits that are there. Now, those vulnerabilities that they're presenting, now it's exploited. We can talk about this perhaps in the next segment, but how the memory and how they, if you don't integrate those memories, so you have this spiritual vulnerability because you're not in a state of grace, you're seeing and encountering evil over there. I mean, that's one of the things that I knew. And Mark, I'd like to hear your comments on this, but I knew even as a young man that I was encountering intrinsic evil. There's something deep, dark, and evil here that I've never encountered before. And so sure, there's going to be those spirits, not just the ancient spirits of the Middle East, and there's some nasty ones, but also just spirits of death and vengeance and these other things that are just going to be all over the place. But then at the same time, the vulnerabilities that you present in the memories. Remember the data set that Father Ripperger calls the data set of where the demon can operate is in the imagination, which is the mind, the precognition. Dealing with these memories is absolutely critical for the returning soldier and Marine. Dealing with those images of combat, dealing with the imagination and the memory of those lives that you took. These things all have to be integrated. And so, on the one hand, you've got this potential vulnerability to the diabolic because you're engaging in a place that is evil, even though it's a good cause. You're still surrounded with evil and ancient spirits, but at the same time, your own vulnerability. If you do not take those memories and integrate them in a Christian way, which we can get into later, but if we don't learn how to integrate those and do something with those, both on a human and a spiritual level, you're going to end up being very vulnerable to diabolic retaliation.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Dan. I would also take that position that it would be both. A little bit of a tangent. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Camel Spiders, but it reminds me of the movie that Jesse just quoted, because camel spiders were virtually non-existent in the U.S. until after the Iraq War, when veterans would start coming back, particularly in 29 Palms, which is a Marine Corps base, the largest as far as like desert terrain, and we use it for training, pre-deployment training. And so they brought back these, the camel spiders are not only large and vicious, but they're, quite smart. So anyway, Marines would be bringing them back, and soldiers would be bringing them back into their, unbeknownst to them, in their luggage and their, in their packs. And then now, the 29 Palms is home to camel spiders, and it's just as if we didn't have enough to worry about over there as far as like other spiders. But anyway, just as you wouldn't wear just a regular plate carrier to try and stop a 50 cal, right? I think many of us are going overseas thinking that we have the full arm, we have the full PPE to really resist all of these other types of rounds, when we don't. And it brings me back to what Mark Twain said, and it's really my favorite quote. He said, "It's not what you don't know that can kill you," I'm paraphrasing, "but rather it's what you know for sure that just ain't so." So I think in the military, there is that tendency to think that, hey, you know what, I am in the military, I have a lot of things going for me. And it bleeds into the other aspects where we think we're not vulnerable, and that's our greatest vulnerability, is to think we have no vulnerabilities. And so as far as, and even just on a very like day-to-day deployment schedule, it doesn't even have to be involving anything traumatic like an IED explosion or seeing, one of your fellow Marines or soldiers get hurt. But it's really just, it's a very materialistic, very hedonistic lifestyle out there as well, especially when it comes to Marines, where it's really very male dominant. The amount of liberties that were taken just on a day-to-day level, that in itself would open anybody up, whether you're overseas or here, let alone when you're out there where you think, oh, there's nothing else to do except, all these other things, to satisfy my body and all, my pleasures. And so let alone when you combine that with the, the clinging spirits that Jesse had referenced, and Dr. Dan as well. I mean, yeah, it's a recipe for, it's a recipe for a spiritual disaster.
It's when I look at what happened to this poor guy that committed suicide, Matthew Liversberger, rest in peace. And I think of what Father Gabriel Amort, the way he describes diabolic obsession. He says, mental discomfort. Matthew had this, okay? He says, obsessive thoughts of violence, anger. He had this as well. The victim is unable to free himself, a state of perpetual desperation. Matthew Liversberger had this, according to the manifesto. Attempts at suicide. Obsession, influence of dreams. According to his manifesto, he had all these things. He had the classic symptoms of diabolical obsession. And the Las Vegas Police Department, as they were reading the manifesto, the letters that he wrote, he also talked about political grievances. I mean, he was a Trumper. He wanted to, I think I'm going to make a connection here. I think he was tired. The way the manifesto read, some of the things that we're saying, he felt betrayed by the government, by the higher powers. In other words, probably seen so many of his, generation being sent into a meat grinder in this endless war. Because of the manifesto, there are these political agreements about, you could tell that he had what doctors call, or psychiatrists, moral injury. He felt betrayed by the higher ups, by the government, and the manifesto. And
and a cover up for there was a cover up from some civilians that were killed. An airstrike was called that he participated in, friendly fire incident, so or something of that nature, that he had a lot of guilt about that.
Yes, he did, and that came out of the manifesto as well. It's like in the Middle Ages, Dan, in the Catholic Church was a practice of called flagellation. Catholics would to make reparation or atonement for their sins, as in justice to God, they would flagellate themselves. This is kind of what Matthew Liversberger went through. He kind of understood, man, I did something horrible over there. Only I know about it. And he kind of wanted to flagellate himself, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think many veterans go through a phase where they look back and they see, did I do the wrong thing? Yeah. Was this a just war? Did I give my best years to something? I can imagine. I mean, I was furious after this horrendous pullout of Afghanistan, and we leave them Apache helicopters and all those other things. It really is just it's a thumb in the eye to those who served and lost their friends over there. I lost a friend over there in Afghanistan in an Apache crash. So you have sometimes this regret, this remorse. He echoes that, but you have to, again, these memories have to be integrated into a Christian identity. That if you don't integrate if you don't integrate your interiority in some way, you have a vulnerability. And here's the problem: is that you go over there, you might be Billy Bad over there, Billy Bad Marine, tough guy, hunter killer over there, and you come back here. That doesn't translate to the interior life. You have to learn how to take all those skills that you learned, right? The precision, the discipline, the pursuit of excellence, the sacrifice, all those things now must be turned onto yourself and learn how to use this to become a better man.